comes to Marvel Zombies, this is an episode that was high up on my what if tier list. Like, we're talking A tier, baby. And I know what you're thinking. That's not S. And true. There were some other things that were above it, but that's only because Marvel Zombies left me wanting more. I just needed more of it. I didn't feel like there was enough. But now we're finally getting that with the show. So, yay! And I have a lot of theories and thoughts about this show as a result. So before it comes out, I would like to talk to you about where I think we're going with this show, what the implications will be for the MCU, and some of the concerns that people seem to have, and kind of address and respond to some of those. So let's talk about that, let's talk about the comics, and let's get into it. But before we do, I want to know, which of these characters that you saw in the trailer, who do you think in Marvel Zombies is going to definitely survive? And then we'll revisit those comments later on when the show is done and we can see who was right. Marvel Zombies is an interesting universe. It actually first appears in a Fantastic Four comic. Actually, not necessarily the Fantastic Four comic. It actually first appeared in another alternate universe, the Ultimate Fantastic Four. If you don't know about Ultimate is Earth 1610 in the comics, or it was Earth 1610. Now there's a new Ultimate universe. But back when it was Earth 1610, the whole reason that we created it, it was all about bringing people back into the comics because it was at a time where the continuity had been going on for so long, it was hard for newer readers to get invested. So we created Ultimate to kind of introduce new readers into the comics. Kind of actually like what we've done with the MCU in a way. So kind of interesting that, Marvel Zombies is appearing here and probably going to get people into the Marvel Zombies comic, which first appeared in a comic that was trying to bring people back in. And what I wonder with Marvel Zombies is if we could possibly see a connection again with Fantastic Four. And I'm wondering, Fantastic Four in the MCU is also from their own alternate universe as well. It's not the Ultimate Universe, but the fact that it is its own separate universe and so is Zombies in the MCU is like, I don't know, man. Could those be mashed up? Could we see a reference to the actual origin of Marvel Zombies? That isn't the only origin of Marvel Zombies, though, because Marvel Zombies would go on to have its own series a few times over, and it would even do a crossover with Evil Dead, with Army of Darkness, with Ash appearing, which was really cool. And in the origins of the Marvel Zombies comic, when we learn about how the virus first came to Earth, it actually came to Earth through Sentry. So it's also cool, too, that we have Sentry, obviously now in Thunderbolts. There's just a whole bunch of threads here that could come together if we want to see some interesting and meaningful references to the origins of the Marvel Zombies universe from the comics. And I think it's cool that Marvel Zombies is going to be animated. Obviously, we had the What If show, so it makes sense to have the animated version here because it's going to be in line. It is itself a spin-off from the What If series. I also love how Marvel Zombies kind of became its own thing in the comics, and now it's becoming its own thing in the animated MCU, which I think is really cool. But it might not stop there. There is a chance that just like Marvel Zombies bled into other things, it could bleed into the live action universe. Would it be crazy? Would it be too crazy for Marvel Studios and Disney to bring something so violent into the MCU live action? Maybe. Maybe it would. But maybe if they get desperate enough, they'll do it. We are obviously entering an era where I think Marvel and Disney are realizing, we need to be creative to keep people engaged in this content. Because if you just do the same thing again and again, it becomes formulaic and people lose interest. So you need to stay creative. And that gives me the hope that we might see some live action Marvel Zombies action. After all, a lot of the characters in What If and now in Marvel Zombies are played by the same actors who played them in live action. So, it would be easy. You already kind of have the cast. You would just have to call them in and have them play their zombie version. And even for characters that are not necessarily the same cast members, you could still have them as alternate versions because it is an alternate universe. So you could even call in those voice actors and have them portray the characters if they can kind of match the look. I think that would be really cool. However, when it comes to some of the more violent things in Marvel Zombies, I will not deny that I'm a little bit nervous about that aspect. I like that we have the MA rating here, and it gives me a lot of faith in the project. The fact that, as I said in my reaction, that Zeb Wells is also going to be kind of our creator on this project gives me a lot of faith too, because I've read some of his stuff and it's been pretty intense. If you haven't read Carnage USA, just give that a read and you will see what I mean. However, when I have read some Marvel comics that have been deemed red band comics, let's just say that sometimes the violence feels a little bit flat. And why that is because I think when it comes to red band, at least in the Marvel comic sphere, is we get a little too obsessed with what we can show. The fact that, there's no holds barred and we can show all this gore and show all these crazy things. And even in the trailer for the animated Marvel Zombies, I did notice there were a lot of people being ripped in half, which is something that I also feel has been overdone a little bit in the comics. And I'm just a little worried that the violence is going to feel a bit redundant here, and I hope that that's not what happens. I think when we have moments like that, they are more impactful when you really care about a character. That's what makes it painful to watch. It's not so much what's happening, it's the fact that you care about this person so much. So to see them in pain, to see them hurt, to see them forever changed or potentially wiped out in a way that's terrible or do terrible things to each other, that messes you up, man. And that is something that I love and hate about Marvel Zombies in the comics. It'll mess you up because you care about these characters and you're watching them do such terrible things to each other and devolve into these monster-like figures. And a lot of the times, a lot of people don't make it through all of this, It's a really messed up series, and I hope that we get to keep some of that. I hope that this show can make us care. After all, we just had Eyes of Wakanda, and I think something that was challenging with that show is because it is so short, because it's only 4 episodes, it's hard for us to feel as invested in some of the characters, and this looks like it's going to be a really big cast, too. Just like we kind of had in Eyes of Wakanda, all of these moving pieces. So I hope we can have that same impact. And when it comes to characters that are, no stranger to a more mature rating, we also are going to have our first appearance in the MCU of Blade, who is a character that, if you are familiar with the original Blade movies, it was a time where Marvel was just doing all these crazy things with Blade and wasn't afraid of making that more adult. And so I think it is really cool that Blade is going to be appearing in something that is, has that MA rating. However, it's a weird time, obviously. This will be our first appearance of Blade, and we still don't really know what's happening with the movie, and we still don't really know what's happening with the game, I feel. There's a lot of unanswered questions as to where we're at with that. And it's also interesting that we obviously don't have Mahershala Ali in Marvel Zombies. Todd Williams is going to be voicing Blade here, and we still aren't sure what's going on with Ali and Blade and the movie and what's happening with that. So the question is Todd Williams going to end up being someone, are we testing the waters to see, who will be the new Blade? But then if that's the case, what's happening with Blade's design here? Because he looks like Ali, kind of. I feel like they're trying to do that. Of course, this whole what's happening with Blade could honestly be its own video. And if they are kind of testing the waters to replace him or trying to wait out that whole connection so they can cast someone new, that would be quite controversial, wouldn't it? And like I said, that's its own video. However, I want to talk about something else with Blade as well, because something that people have been talking about is this idea of Blade being Moon Knight here, and some people seem to not be down for that. They feel that, we already have a Moon Knight, and why is Blade Moon Knight, and what's happening with that? Well, one thing I will say is that in the comics, Moon Knight is more of a title. It's not really always has to be Mark Spector, because Moon Knight is the avatar of Khonshu, the god of the moon. And so Moon Knight's role is to help guide the travelers of the night as an avatar of Khonshu, which when it comes to Blade, I actually think it's really cool that we're seeing Blade as Moon Knight or Blade Knight, because that's something that Blade has just been doing this whole time anyways. He is basically someone that helps to shepherd people safely through the night. That is part of his job. as someone that hunts vampires. So I think that those are two kind of roles that fit really well together. The idea of the character of Blade also being Moon Knight. At the same time, I think that people that are concerned about, Blade taking Moon Knight's place need to remember that we've already seen things like that kind of happen in the comics, because Mark hasn't always been around. Mark Spector actually recently in the comics was dead for a time in Jed McKay's run, actually got killed off. And we also have things like the Midnight Mission. Oftentimes, I think Moon Knight is a cool character in the comics because him being Moon Knight isn't even always the most interesting thing about Mark Spector. There's a lot of layers to that character. There's a lot of personalities when it comes to that character. And I think what also makes him such an interesting even hero when he is Moon Knight is actually his supporting cast. A lot of the times he's not a character that does things alone. He has a whole group of people that are helping him and who are also acting to support him in his role and aiding him to shepherd people through the night. That's what you see with the Midnight Mission, and something that I've really enjoyed whenever I've dipped a toe into the Moon Knight mythos, which I would encourage you to do. If you're not reading the comics, definitely check out Jed McKay's run. It's been fabulous. Jed McKay has been doing Moon Knight for so long. I mean, honestly, that's how you know it's good. And that's not the only thing that I noticed in the trailer. There's a lot to take in this trailer. And something that I thought was interesting, actually, is the return of Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, which is awesome for a lot of reasons. I didn't know if we were ever going to see Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch again. Now she's returning. She's going to come back to growl in that sound booth for us again. But the other thing is that Wanda had such presence in the Marvel What If episode. She really was so powerful, and we never really defeated her. We just escaped her. To see her return here, and the fact that she has those glowing red eyes again, and the fact that all the zombies in this have glowing red eyes, when previously, if you remember in the What If episode, they didn't all have glowing red eyes. In fact, I think Captain America had green eyes, and now he's got red eyes here. What does that mean? Is it possible that Wanda could actually be controlling these zombies? Is it possible that Wanda could be our new big bad here? And how cool is that? In the comics, too, I will say that the zombies actually do talk more, whereas in this universe, they seem to be more like kind of unintelligible grunting to communicate. My grunt was so bad. I need to work on that. Zombie grunting. It's something that I'm workshopping over here. So it is also possible that we could actually even see more from Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch if we let our zombies do more in this universe like we see with them in the comics. When it comes to the comics as well, I think another thing that people are concerned about in terms of the animated version that we're seeing is that a lot of people feel that there are characters that are being disrespected because they are instantly zombified in this trailer. To that I will say, I don't think anyone is actually going to be safe. If you are familiar with Marvel Zombies in the comics, people becoming zombies isn't really disrespecting them because kind of everyone becomes a zombie almost. Like, not a lot of people live. So it's expected, in my opinion, that almost no one here will survive. Almost no one is safe. I've heard that Miss Marvel actually might be one of our main characters, or the main character in the miniseries. And I would say even Kamala wouldn't be safe, even if that's the case. Like, no one is safe. That's what I love about Marvel Zombies, to be honest with you. Like I said, it's a love and hate relationship. There's gross stuff that I'm like, but then at the same time, I kind of love that it makes you really feel a lot of stuff, even when it's messed up, because it means that you care for the characters. You care what's happening. When it comes to Marvel Zombies, if you're feeling that there's a character that you love, that, you saw zombified and that upsets you, I will say that that's kind of the point of Marvel Zombies. It is upsetting. It's an upsetting universe. And I hope that they keep it that way. And I hope that it feels like no one is safe, because that, for me, is a lot of the fun of the comic. The fun and the torment at the same time. Those are my thoughts so far right now on Marvel Zombies. I would love to know what your thoughts are. I would love to know what your theories are. I would love to know what you're excited for, what you're concerned about down in the comments below. And I do want to do more of a deep dive on this show on this universe in the comics as well on the channel. So if you like this video and if you like the idea of learning more about the comics, if you are not familiar with them, or just if you want to like chat more about that, feel free to click that subscribe button because I will be doing some more Marvel Zombies content. And let me know down in the comments what you want to see from me in regards to this universe, because it's a weird one and I love that we're getting this so close to the Halloween season. So exciting. That's all I have for this one, friends. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And until next time, as always, stay nerdy. Bye. And if you like when I talk about Marvel, you need to check this out, especially if you like comics.